I used to get adverts for erectile dysfunction. Now I get adverts for funeral planning. I never get adverts for iPhones, the latest technology now. It's bloody funeral planning. Children inspire me. We're at our best when we're very small, toddlers. We want to escape from under the folds of our parents. We'll run away, we'll walk backwards, we'll walk on walls, we'll swing on things. It was my late 20s when I realised I'm flawed, I'm vulnerable, I'm not perfect. But my God, I am me. And me, I'm going to allow to develop.
What if your biggest breakthrough came at 60? What if the most powerful version of yourself was still ahead, even if you feel stuck right now? This week I spoke with Mike. He was homeless, now he's building movements, inspiring companies and lighting up rooms with more energy than most 25-year-olds. We talk about the lies we believe about success, about why finding your purpose might be screwing you over, and what people completely misunderstand about getting older. You're not too late, you're not too broken, you're not done. Let's go. Mike, what's something you've learned in life that most people don't realize until it's too late?
That's a brilliant question. I think the thing that I've learnt above all else is that no matter where you are, you can reinvent yourself. You know, that you get into a stuck position and you become down and you think life is closing down, but actually there is a light. And the capacity we have to completely reinvent ourselves is there, and it's there in abundance. We just don't reach for it because our instincts and our past tells us it's not going to work. But because I had to do so much of that when I was younger, I trained those muscles and got that belief that no matter where you are, you can emerge as something else within weeks. And it's not about emerging into the world you know, because the world just now is pretty dark. I mean, I see young people with their shoulders drooped. And it's awful that we've done that to a young generation. But the thing that really strikes me is that it's at times like these that people will find something new, and you've got to, in a sense, do it in your reimagined world. Don't try and respond to today. Try and respond to the world that you want to live in just a few years down the line. Because I'm sure it will shift. I'm sure it will shift. And if you dwell too much on the problems around us, then you sometimes forget that it's people like you and I that is going to change the world.
So kind of what I'm taking from that is imagining where you see yourself in the next whatever time frame it might be for you, and then you're putting the energy into the right direction. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's about having a laser. My purpose has never changed. Right, never changed. The tactics have changed, the direction of travel has changed, but it's always been pretty laser focused. I want people to be the very best they can be, and to see themselves as powerful and as leaders in the world. And it is very easy to see all the problems, and I'm a bit of a problem solver or a solution finder. So, and I think creatively. So, I mean, I'll just give an example. In Scotland, in Glasgow, they set up something called the Violence Reduction Unit. Now, Glasgow had a reputation for being murder capital of Europe, and it had, high number of knife attacks. So they set up the Violence Reduction Unit, and instead of bringing uniformed people in to speak to people and interview them, they had people wearing T-shirts, just asking them, if they were to start their life again, what would it be like? So then they put them through a program. It was quite disciplined, but it took them, away from crime to get to realise what their real talents are and to have a purpose other than one that involved crime. And it was quite disciplined. But the result is that over the next 10 years, they reduced knife crime by 62% and they halved the murder rate. So, it was by working with people as colleagues rather than locking them up as prisoners and breaking that cycle and realising they actually reascribed violence from just a crime to a public health issue. And that was very, very clever because, so much violence is out of, fear. It's out of identity. It's out of peer group pressure. It's out of, having to play a part, having to play a role in the world because you think that's what's been assigned to you. And it changes the script. Mm-hmm. And it's a dramatic difference because we could spend the next, 100 years locking everyone up after their first crime, and then they keep going back in because you learn the way of prison. You become dependent on the institution of prison. So you don't know how to cope with the outside world. All you do is go back to the people you knew in the first place, and you're going to get involved again. So you see these repeats all the time. And if you think of all the things that are repeated, and if you were to break that cycle, you're doing something imaginative and something that has an impact.
Mm-hmm. Well, doesn't it come back to sometimes we want someone to tell us you can ask yourself these questions. You are able to figure out and answer what you want to do in life, and you're not dependent on everything around you. You can make up your own mind and you can take responsibility. And I feel like sometimes people need someone to tell them that because it's really hard to get to that point on your own. And if we're sitting down and it's not a hierarchy, we're sitting on the same level, we're talking eye to eye, and I'm really listening to you, what you're saying, also between the lines, then I feel like I would feel heard, and I would feel like, okay, there's someone who really wants to understand me, and then I'm able to maybe open up a little bit more and maybe figuring out what I want to do, and then I think that's where it starts and where we can really have a positive impact on the future as well.
Absolutely. Look, I've done things in my life which were different, and they've somehow worked. So this ability to kind of cut through something that's just because you look for solutions from the past, right? And that's the worst thing you can do. Is you almost have to pluck solutions out of an unknown future. I mean, I remember I used to do the annual report for the Scottish Football Association, and I know we're not very good internationally at football, but we've got a good fan base and there's a culture. And I suggested we put a girl on the front cover of the Scottish Football Association annual report. And they said, well, a girl. I said, look, women's football is going to become much more important over the next few years. Be a pioneer. Put a girl with a Scotland strip on the front. She actually was an internationalist. It wasn't a made-up thing. But, some people shook their heads. And of course, it made women think we are part of the national football game now. So it gave them a lot of confidence. It's little things like that.
Yeah. Mike, you've lived 75 years, but I feel like the energy you bring with you, it feels like someone in their 20s. Where does that come from? What's fueling you these days?
Well, I'm not 75 yet. 6 days. So I'm still 74. But 75. I think it's having a purpose. And I don't want to leave behind a world that makes me feel ashamed, even though I've tried to do my best to avert all the things that are happening. But it energizes you to know that you can still make a contribution. And it energizes me to feel the words that make a difference to people's lives. Listen, I want to work with young people. I was in a school earlier this week. Their heads are down. And I asked them what was troubling them, and they said war, rising prices, racism, all these things and of course, their future. We've created a world which has been used to disrupt in so many different ways, and what a setting to give to our young people. We should be setting a different kind of mood music. We should be passing on responsibility and leadership to them and helping them to lead. Not simply saying, well, you'll inherit what we leave behind. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be awful. That's rubbish. And I think that you've got to stir people up in a very positive way and not say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You say, look, Let's have a conversation. It's a different kind of conversation. Let's start painting a picture of what you want. And it starts in workplaces, and it starts in communities, and it starts in families. It starts in schools, universities and colleges. Actually, I've always gone down really well in universities and colleges, because I shouldn't, because of my age. But I think that when I tell my stories, people kind of relate to it. And I never think I'm talking down to people. I think I'm talking up to people, if that makes sense. And when you tell stories, people recognise that what you're talking about is real. And I think it's that sense of purpose. It really is. I don't want to see people in their 20s walking around with their shoulders slumped and their head down because they're worried about the world we're living in. Because I want them to feel ownership for the world and to take responsibility and to lead on initiatives and to challenge what's there. Because we have got so much manipulation in the world just now, trying to manipulate for very, sinister ends. And as it's all about greed and power. And the only way to tackle greed and power is to wrest it away and keep your own power. I get energised by that. I get energised by great music. I get energised by conversation. I get energised by, walking around in nature. But I sometimes feel tired, and that tiredness comes from, sometimes trying too hard. But I want to be out on the stages. I want to be meeting younger people around the world, not just in Scotland. I want to be part of the solution. But in encouraging other people to take up those solutions and getting people to think, slightly differently. And this is, I had an advertising agency for a while, so advertising is all about, thinking of wholly different ways to sell something, to explain something. And that's what I do. And you get people thinking, wow, if we just did that, it's not going to cost anymore, but it's going to have more impact. And that's...
I feel like this is a good point before we go any further, because I have so many questions and thoughts. But for those who don't know you yet, what are the chapters of your life that most shaped you and who you are today?
Right, okay. Well, I was born to a Lebanese mother and a Scottish-Irish father. So I'm mixed race. And when I was born in 1950, that was quite unusual on these shores. So I had that, knowing I was a bit different. I then spent 3 years in Pakistan because my dad got a job over there. So I experienced a totally different culture and then came back after 3 years. I was quite a sick child and I hated school. I could not concentrate. I was made to feel stupid. I couldn't see the blackboard. Teachers always seemed to have their back to the class because we're always writing with chalk on a blackboard. That's the way it was. I found it bullying. They punished you. They didn't like me because I couldn't concentrate. And yet, outside school, I was very creative. And when I reached my 14 and 15 years, I was singing in a band outside school and being told I was useless at music inside school. So I was eventually thrown out of school, and my parents were breaking up at this stage. I was getting chased by a gang. I went down to London to break free, and although I got a job very quickly, I got the sack because none of the customers apparently could understand a word I said in my Scottish accent. So I was thrown out of my bed and breakfast, so I ended up sleeping out. And that was hard for 18 months. And then I went to Dublin and I was busking, became good friends with Thin Lizzy, who were just starting out at that time. Then went back to London, did lots of jobs, construction, steel. I played music as well. I played at festivals and clubs. And then, later on I became a community development worker, and I took all my experience of being homeless to work with a community and just see what you can do with people when you're focusing on the positive and you're putting them in the driving seat. And then you find people have got strengths. They have got leadership skills. They have got abilities they never knew they had or never felt entitled to. So then I went into business when I was 43 and had a creative agency for 20 years doing really well until the banking crisis, and I lost everything. So I had to start again. And I started again as a speaker and a catalyst, I think. It's the best way to describe it. I hate being called a speaker because it's not the fact that I'm a speaker, it's the fact that I make an impact on people. You know, it could be a one-to-one conversation, but in fact,
Yeah.
I like speaking to audiences. So that's what I've been doing for the last however many years until I'm 75.
Yeah, it's about the content of or the message you're trying to spread. It's not about how you do it. I mean, you could do it as a speaker, quote unquote. You could do it as
Yeah.
someone talking to individuals. And that's what I wanted to come back to. I feel like that's what we want, or not maybe want, but what people need is the connection of these generations. Because I want someone who has life experience, who can tell me how certain things work that I couldn't know it yet because I haven't experienced it. But you also want the, let's call it younger generations, with their kind of positive naivety or positive inspiration, whatever you want to call it. That's where the magic happens, because then you have someone who maybe has an idea and believes it can be done, and you have the other person who would be a little, let's say, they wouldn't, approach it in that way, but you have the experience, and if you connect it, you can really create something beautiful. And that's what it's missing for me. For example, I was always looking for, I would have loved to have a mentor or a person with more life experience in some other field, just someone I can connect with, someone I can talk to and see what I can take away from that. And I feel like it could work both ways. And if we can make that happen more and start out connecting these different perspectives, that could really make a difference.
Well, when I was younger, of course, we didn't have the structure of society that we've got now. So if I went into a bar or I started a workplace, I looked to older people to guide me. I mean, it happened, and I heard so many stories in bars in Scotland and in Ireland. People who were sitting in bars talking about, that horrible time in Irish history when they were fighting for their existence, for their independence. And you heard the stories from people who were still around. They remember the troops, the black and tans coming to the door. And then, of course, in workplaces, people said, you don't have to do it that way. There's a faster way of doing it. And they always encouraged you. And we've lost that. If you go to bars now, there's still a few in Edinburgh. But it is, young people have got their bars. Gay people tend to have their bars. We've segmented because we've all become consumers. And that's the trap we've fallen into. So, I used to get adverts for erectile dysfunction. Now I get adverts for funeral planning because of my age demographic. I never get adverts for iPhones, the latest technology now. It's bloody funeral planning. So that's what we've done. We've segmented the population into, buyer markets. And advertising does that as well. I know, you imagine this person, this woman of 32, who's got aspirations to go uptown and look like a city slicker. So you target her. And I think that we have become consumers in a world that demands movers and shakers.
I think that's what's happening a lot also in the younger generations. We are feeling connected because of social media, but then again, we're so disconnected to everything. And that's, I think, why the quote unquote purpose, this word is rising or was rising a lot. People are looking for their purpose, whatever that is. So what would you say to someone who feels lost because they haven't found it yet?
Well, I suppose when I look back at my young years, someone who I hadn't seen for 40 years got in touch about 7 years ago. And I mean, they knew nothing of the me that is now. And they said, I've seen you're doing motivational speaking. And I said, yeah, funny turn of events. And they said, you were always going to do that. And I said, what? I was sleeping out in London, doing this and doing that. And they said, yeah, but the signs were there. And I do think the signs are often there. We miss them, or we dismiss them, or someone else dismisses them. So sometimes it's simply thinking back to what you used to dream of, what you used to feel passionate about. I've talked to so many young people who found that passion. And sometimes it's when I'm in a room and I talk about things and I say, if I was to remove all other thoughts, what one would be the last one to leave your mind? Sometimes it's a negative. Sometimes it's the way that people talked to me when I was young. So I say, maybe your passion, is to start changing the language, start changing the narrative. Because, when people say things to you as a young child, they stay. They stay.
Mm.
So not only do you want to rid yourself of the horrible things that are happening in your life, but you want to make it different for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I've just realised I didn't have the microphone in there. Is it coming across okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah. So I think the clues are often there, but when I talk to a group of people, I can see them beginning to register what their purpose is. And if you find, then you find people who've got collective purpose. And the purpose is the thing that, it doesn't matter. I'll tell you a story, right? I was in South Beirut in 2006, and it was 2 days after the bombing, which had been going on for 2 weeks. And there was destruction everywhere. I mean, when you see that, you just think, why does this happen? But there was dust. You were breathing in dust. There was a horrible sense of doom, and you saw the little signals of life. Furniture crushed, cars crushed under concrete, little items of clothing, photographs, and there was a guy on top of the rubble who was selling clothing. And my guide said that used to be a shop 2 days ago, and it was completely flattened. So I went up and I said, it must have been horrible to lose your shop. And he said, I'm not a shopkeeper. I give people style and confidence. And I thought, wow, that's purpose. Because a lot of people would say, I'm a shopkeeper and my shop's gone down. I've lost things. I can't do it anymore. And the same happened with some restaurants during COVID, because they all had to shut down in this country. And a couple of the very, good restaurants started sending out, parcels with ice boxes, and they put all the ingredients in and they put the recipe in. And it was a great success because they didn't say we're a restaurant. They said, our role is to tantalise people's taste buds and give them great food experiences. So they were able to continue that. And he was able to continue giving people style and confidence because he didn't see himself as a shopkeeper. So, when you tell these stories, people begin to understand what purpose is. It's the thing that you won't be swayed from.
Do you think there's a difference between finding purpose and simply showing up with meaning?
Well, showing up with meaning is in itself a purpose. You know what I mean? It's your purpose might be to be there, to absorb, to learn, to glean all you can from people and experiences. And in a sense, that's what I was like when I was younger. Once I'd made that break, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to, I didn't want to sleep out. But after that, if I'm going to take risks and I'm going to learn from everyone I meet, and I'm going to go into places that I don't feel comfortable with, and I'm going to go to places that I feel threatened by, and I'm going to go to places where people like me just don't go. And I loved that experience, and I kind of, almost merged with the environment in some way and learnt so much.
How did you manage to stay on your own path without getting lost comparing yourself to others?
I think there's an age where it all comes right. And I would say it was my late 20s when I realised, yes, I am different. I am a unique person. I've got unique traits. And I've not allowed myself to be compromised because it is very easy to mimic other people and to see other people as a comparison. Mark Twain wrote, "Comparison is the death of joy." And I agree with that. I don't think, you have to begin to say, I'm flawed, I'm vulnerable, I'm not perfect, but my God, I am me. And me, I'm going to allow to develop. I'm going to develop me, because if I don't develop me, my contribution to the world will be curtailed because I'll become tailored to other people's environments. So, and as an employer for many years as well, you don't want someone to come in and just be someone else at a desk, another designer. You want them to say, I've got ideas, I can help you to do something a bit different. And that's what employers actually look for. They don't look for people fitting, square holes into square boxes. They want people, they want square plugs for round holes. And they want people who have got wacky ideas, and they want, particularly nowadays, because innovation is what keeps business going, but it's also what keeps society going. And we're very good at innovating in business, but look at all the social challenges we have. We need innovation around that as well. And there's no one really applying themselves to that, because that's what politicians are meant to do. Politicians don't think creatively. I mean, in my experience, and they've got a language which is, it doesn't excite me. It doesn't make me feel that they understand the world and what needs to be done. And they have to talk to everyone. They have to talk to everyone and say, look, you might be a billionaire, and I congratulate you on that, but as you're a billionaire, you can pay a bit more tax than someone who's earning a pittance, and you can contribute to building our country. Because if we build our country and give people better education, you're going to benefit if you're in business. We and have that kind of rounded sense of what society is at the moment.
I feel like politics, that's an interesting topic, because you can really get involved in that, not even involved in the sense of that you're someone who's who's taking part in that in your city or whatever, but you can get really involved into the news, into the political decisions, etc. And then it feels like you're in control somehow, and it feels like you're changing something. And I feel like it has its purpose, but you have an obligation to figure out what's your role in all that. And some people tend to believe that politics is the way to go. Some people believe in businesses. Some people believe in maybe these two things combined, whatever it is. But I feel like you need to find your own way. And that doesn't mean that even if my way today is different than my way in the future, that's fine. You're always allowed to change your beliefs. You're always allowed to go a different path. But not making a decision is also a decision. So make a decision where you want to put your energy. And I feel like we owe it to ourselves and our future selves to believe in something bigger and to believe that things are possible, and to take responsibility by doing something, and doing something for us and then for the people around us.
Yeah, I agree. And I was talking to young people in a school this week, and I was saying, you don't have to change the world today, but you can find one thing that you can begin to take control of, one thing that you can change. And you start with very small things. I mean, my people used to say to me when I was young, start by tidying your bedroom and working out. It's just, you're not going to change the world overnight. But you look at someone like Greta Thunberg now. She's got autism or Asperger's, and that gave her a strength because she had this laser focus. Whether you like her or don't like her, you can't help but think, my goodness, she's made a big seismic difference in the world by giving young people a sense that the environment really is under threat, and we've got to do something about it. So there are people doing it, and it doesn't mean you have to rush headlong into a group. because if you go to a group, you might have to accede to all the rules and their belief system. And it's quite good to stand outside it and meet people from different walks of life. And, you know, you can create something. I've done more outside politics than I could have done inside politics.
Mm.
You know, when I had my creative agency, I did some, you know, how do you recruit foster carers? And I spoke to foster carers. Does that, you understand that? It's like adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I said, oh, why are we always showing images of children who are forlorn and are looking for someone to take them into their home? Because we all know that they are there, and it depresses us, and sometimes it disempowers us because we think, I can't do enough. When I focused in the advertising on the joy that foster carers got from having these children in their lives, the number of people wanting to be foster carers went up. It was just flipping it round.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, you know, you have to look at things and say, do we need to just completely reframe it? Because we've always done it this way. The focus has always been on, you know, people dying of cancer, lying in a bed. And then they turned it around and they showed people happily smiling, walking through a meadows because they've been cured of cancer. And that is much more money than showing people as victims. So, you know, the advertising industry played quite a big role in some social causes because they understood the motivations of people. And you're motivated by, you know, positive things rather than negative things, because negative things make you feel disempowered and depressed.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like you're running towards something and not running away from something.
Exactly.
So you told me that there were many setbacks in your life as well, and you had to rebuild your life.
Yeah.
Like even homelessness, for example. Was there a moment where you thought, I'm going to make it out of this?
It was, yes. Actually, it was I had two experiences. One, I was picked up by a charity one night and taken to a hostel. And I thought, oh, bless. You know, it was very cold. And the first thing that happened, I was shown into a tiled room. This is back in 1967. And I was told to take my clothes off, which I did. And then there was a hose pointed at me. You know, hose down.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I felt so humiliated. And I went back into the streets, because at least there I felt I had some dignity. So I kept away from all these agencies trying to help me, because I thought, if that's how they make me feel, because, you know, I had a name, I had a background, and I said, you know, a few years later, I said, homeless people, accommodation is not their number one priority. What they need above all else is to feel valued and to feel significant. And that's the first step. It's not, I need a house, because you actually get used to sleeping out. And sometimes you become claustrophobic when you go into a building, you know, and try to sleep all night. So it is that, you know, human dignity, if you're valued, if you feel significant, then your behaviour changes for the better. It doesn't matter who you are. But then I was picked up by the police one night and put in a cell, a prison cell. It was a minor thing, and in the morning, as they were letting me go, this policeman said, look, before you leave, I want you to tell me what your dreams are. And I thought, the police are asking me about my dreams. This is highly unusual. But actually it was a stroke of genius, because I said something like, I want to get somewhere to live and a job. And he said, they're not dreams, they're your next steps. So distinguish between the two. He says, what are your dreams? And I had to really think, because I'd never been asked for my dreams before. I'd never been given permission to believe that my dreams had any real meaning. And eventually I said, well, look, I want to do well in my music, because I can play the guitar and I can sing. And one day I want to set up a business. And he said, go and make it happen. This is the police.
Mm-hmm.
They were meant to be my enemy. But in fact, the charity that was there to help me made me feel that small. And here was this policeman making me feel that tall as he was releasing me from a cell. Right? It didn't make sense. So that did have a huge impact. And And a year later I was playing my guitar and singing in Dublin. So I had dismissed the idea that music could be part of my life. It was something I'd done at home, and I didn't have a guitar, and it was all in the past. And this policeman had, delved deeply enough for me to say, actually, I want to be a musician, I want to do well. And of course, years later I set up business. So they both happened. But if you don't dream, then you've got nothing to go towards. Dreams are something that most people will bury because they think I'm not entitled. The other thing that happened was I was working in a construction site years later, and the foreman, he said to me, Michael, could you do me a favour? And I said, yes. He says, he gave me these keys and he said, will you open up the site in the morning? And I said, me? Oh, I was 21. And he said, yes, I trust you. And I realised then that no one had ever said, I trust you before. And I was in tears going home, and I held these keys so close to my chest in case I lost them. And the next morning I was in really early, absurdly early. I didn't even sleep because I was afraid I'd sleep in. And I went and opened the site and I thought, I've made it. And I kept thinking of those words, I trust you, Michael. It was huge, a huge moment. So I, as someone who's aged 74, coming on 75 very shortly, understand that the language I use with young people can make or break them. And teachers often make them or break them. Parents can make or break their children. I think they're doing them a favour by saying, you'll never be a footballer. You're too small to do this. You're too stupid to go to university. Choose something to do with your hands. And we hear this all the time. Or the other end of the spectrum is parents who tend to be a bit wealthier, who are pushing their children, pushing, driving. I was a doctor, your grandfather was a doctor, you're going to be a doctor. And they don't want to be a doctor. And they get driven down. I've spoken to children in primary school who say, my mother wants me to be a teacher and I want to be a top criminal lawyer. You think, how does this happen? My mother says I'm going to be a teacher. No parent's got a right to do that. You can't dragoon your children into doing what you want them to do or what the family inheritance is.
It's so sad because it's kind of, I feel like the same with advice, I tend to not I give advice to friends and close friends, but I'm not telling them what to do or how to change because I feel like either way it's going to be bad. If I tell you something and you're doing it and it works out,
yes,
whose win is it? Is it my win then because I told you? And if it doesn't work out, I'm in fault. And that's what I feel like kind of applies to the situation as well. You want your children to make up their own mind, live their own lives, have their own failures, have their own moments of success, and they are not coming back to you. Well, of course, you're part of it usually because you were the one setting up maybe the starting point, whatever, depending on the family, of course. But yeah, I feel like that's so important and undervalued.
Absolutely. We make mistakes. You've got to be allowed to make mistakes because if, sometimes at school, there's this right or wrong thing. Absolute blanket. That's wrong, that's right. And sometimes there are nuances. I remember a teacher said, tell me who your favourite poet is. And I said Bob Dylan, and he laughed and he mocked me and he said, I'm looking for a serious answer. This was, when Bob Dylan was producing Blowing in the Wind and Times They Are A-Changing and all these songs. And so I was mocked for that. And everyone else, of course, went to the established poets. And I went home and I felt humiliated. Why couldn't you see Bob Dylan as a poet? But I was mocked. And of course, just a few years ago, Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So I was right. And he was wrong. But he had a dogma about English, He had a dogmatic approach. And here's a child saying to you, I think Bob Dylan's a poet. wouldn't you go and read the words and come back and say, yes, you're right, he is a poet? No, it was a boo dismissal. And of course everyone was laughing at me for coming up with the wrong answer. And it wasn't the wrong answer. So you can never be dogmatic about anything, because I might be wrong. And even if I'm not wrong, if I hear a young person say something, it inspires me. Children inspire me. We're at our best when we're very small, toddlers.
Yeah.
We're running about, we're not, we don't want to copy our parents, we want to escape from under the folds of our parents. We'll run away, we'll walk backwards, we'll walk on walls, we'll swing on things, we'll pick up things and try and eat them when we shouldn't, because that's what children do. And then if you're told not to do anything, not to, then you begin to close down. And I think that's what happens. We're at our best when we're children. And I think we should be at our best when we're adults.
Yeah, I think we should keep up this energy and this openness to new experiences and learning and trying out things. I'm missing the part, like the person I was when I was not so heavily burdened with, let's call it influences from life and the news and whatever, because I feel like there was more this mindset of just doing the thing, not worrying too much. And now it's about finding the balance between these two, because it's also important to have a plan and have a vision, but it's also important to just keep on doing and moving and making a mistake, because how should you know if it was something you would do differently looking backwards if you don't do it? You have to do it, and then you can decide differently on the next turn. And that's also was for me a huge mind-blowing moment when I realized, I mean, you can make a decision today, but you can make a different decision tomorrow, and that's fine. You just have to be yourself, and you have to stick to your values and whatever they might be, and then you're good to go.
I've still got the child in me. I never want to abandon that child. That child was frightened, but that child was also risk-taking. I mean, and you know when people say the waiter delivers a plate to your table in a restaurant, they say, don't touch the plate, it's hot. Just about everyone goes like that.
Yeah.
That's the child in you. You know, that's you're not going to tell me what I can touch or not. I need to test it myself, and you go, yeah, it is hot. And that's what a child would do, and that's what adults should do as well. You know, find the play, and the best ideas come out of playing. You know, just throwing ideas and not being serious. Saying, imagine if the leaders of countries had to build their vision with Lego. I mean, imagine if you said that and someone said, actually, that's not a bad idea. We should, because that would make them think much more about how things connect.
Mm-hmm. That
just came out of my head just now, by the way.
Yeah.
It's got material. And I do these creative sessions with people, and I say, tomorrow I want you to come up with some big ideas of how you can improve your customer service, for example. And I say, right, you're going to be Disney, or you're going to be Southwest Airlines, you're going to be Virgin, and you're going to be Innocent Drinks. Because I've shown them some of the things that these companies have done to, random collisions and random acts of kindness and all that sort of thing. Disney, our focus is on making magic memories, never using a negative word in any of our discourse, any of our signage. And they come back with ideas then, because you've taken them out of being them. You've taken them out. You're saying, you're now working for Disney. How differently do you think about the world?
Hmm.
And it's dynamite. And they come up with ideas that if you'd said, I want you to go away and come up with a few customer service improvement ideas, and they go, well, I don't have any ideas. It's like the supermarket in Holland. It's got two colours of baskets. One is green and one is blue. And people with a green basket are saying, I'm open to have conversations with people. And the blue basket is saying, sorry, I've got to get round to do my shopping quickly. Just a small, simple idea that makes people connect with each other.
Yeah.
Simple idea. Who came up with that? I don't know, but that's a brilliant idea.
And it's also a little sad that we need these ideas, you know?
Yeah, I know, but right now we do. The biggest thing we've got to do is reconnect. And I'm absolutely with you. I would rather, I can't say that, but I like speaking to young audiences. I would love to speak to all over the world. I really would, because I want to be a catalyst, not just a speaker. And I do want to change the world, and I think we can change it. And I think we can change it, fairly quickly. I do think that capitalism is going to have to reform, because at the moment it's just it's getting too big. We've got no control over these great corporations. But if you go for stakeholder capitalism and understand that around every business is an ecosystem, governments put money in, the community buys into it. If you look after the community, your employees buy into it, you hope. But if they're all stakeholders, and it's not simply shareholders, then you tone it down. You tone it down. They become much more responsible citizens of the world. They're not polluting the earth as the big oil companies.
Yeah.
They don't care. Politicians who deny climate change, what kind of people are they that they will imperil future generations? I do ask that. What kind of person says, well, as long as in my lifetime I can extract all I can from the earth, regardless of the impact? Climate change may not be true, but 98% of scientists say it is. We've got the evidence, and it's happening all the time. Who do you believe? A leader who's going to make billions out of it, an oil company that's going to extract everything they can from the earth and make huge amounts of money. Who do you trust?
And then it comes back to also maybe the child in them that never really got the attention, the love, and they're looking to grab and hold on to something, filling a need they never were able to fill, but they will never be able to fill it also with loads of money or whatever it is.
No, it's a constant quest, and you're right. A lot of it does go back to childhood, and I think when you see Elon Musk's parents, his father in particular, you think, God, no wonder, it's he's a damaged, he's a damaged person. He was a damaged child. They thought he had learning difficulties when he was at school, and he's done really well from it. But at what cost? I don't know. But he's a troubled man. You can tell, and it's something that wasn't attended to in childhood, no doubt. I mean, the need to be up there and the centre of attention, the need to have so many children. I mean, with so many women, it's like a Tesla production plant. And these people are damaged. Yeah, I think there are people who their lust for things comes from being deprived as a child and not having a sense of ownership for anything.
Yeah. What do most people get wrong about aging? What do you think younger generations misunderstand about growing older?
Right. I can answer this really quite easily. Don't. Because what happens is people tell you, or you tell yourself, I'm in my 40s now, that's the end of the world as I know it. No, it's not. It's the beginning. And I try and see each age I've been at as a new beginning. And you cannot allow, people say, why didn't you retire? Why don't you retire? Well, I couldn't afford to retire because I lost a lot of money, but I would never have retired. And now I'm driven by a purpose, and it's about, making the world a much better place and doing it as fast as we can, and working with young people and, people who are like-minded across all age groups. Because we've got to take back someone said to me yesterday, the rise of the good, and I like that. We've got to do that. We've got to empower people, and we've got to say, look, we might have to do some things ourselves, but there's also lots of ways you can do something that don't involve money. And the city of Curitiba in southern Brazil?
No.
A mayor called Jaime Lerner, he became mayor, and his vision was a city designed for people. Now, who's going to argue with that? city design for people. If he said we're going to reduce carbon emissions, we're going to do this, then people feel threatened by it.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's going to say, I don't want a city designed for people. But anyway, he transformed that city, and he did some amazing things. He went to the slum dwellers and he said, I want you to recycle all your waste. And of course, they're living on the very edges of existence. So he knew that. He said, in exchange, I will give you food and football tickets. And he said, I want you to be involved in building your own new homes. We will train you, we will support you, we will pay you. I mean, that was just an act of genius. And then, he said to his operations department, he wanted to show that pedestrianisation could enhance the shopping experience. And he said, how long does it take to pedestrianise a street? And they said, 3 to 6 months. And he said, I want it done in 48 hours. Did they do it in 48 hours? Yes, they did. And on the Monday morning, because it was done over the weekend, children were not tethered to their parents and running about, people were eating sandwiches, sitting down on benches. And by the way, they were spending more money. So all the neighbouring shopkeepers came and said, we want that.
Mm-hmm.
They created the largest pedestrianised precinct in the world. To cut a long story short, Curitiba was transformed. It's got the best transport system anywhere in the world. More people use that in a city of just over 3 million people than use New York's subway system and bus system, which is 8.6 million people. Its economy has gone up, average earnings have gone up, GDP's gone up. The 64% of the traditionally poorest population now work in the construction industry. And I think it's 65.4 square metres of green space per person. No, not individually, but that's a lot of green space. It's a beautiful city and very, very high resident satisfaction rates. He was an artist, he was an architect. He wasn't a traditional politician. There may be something in that,
Definitely. To get back a little bit to life stages, I got asked this, or someone asked me to ask you.
Yeah.
How has your self-image changed across the different stages of your life?
Well, that's very, very interesting. I suppose at one stage I was a bit of a looker. My body was really good when I went down to beaches. I felt I was probably strutting a bit, because I felt I was at the kind of height of my attractiveness, and that went through to my 40s. So I had an image of, perhaps a bit of ego in there. But I also, I had an image of someone who chatted to everyone. But now people are more suspicious. So as a child, I was frightened. I was very, I kept to myself. As a teenager, I found myself as a performer. And I was a performer. In my 20s, I was a performer. Then I was a reformer because I worked in communities. So it was all about seeing other people succeed. All about that. So that was a shift. It wasn't about me, it was about other people. And then that went on for quite a long time. Actually, physically, mentally helping people to make a step up in their world. And then in business, it was about, bucking trends. It was about using creativity. We did quite a lot of social programs as well as private. So it was about showing how creativity and imagination can make social change as well. So that was my driven purpose. And then now it's, I just wondered about I am me. My self-image, I think it's pretty good. I think, I wish my stomach was smaller. I wish some of those things that happen as you get older hadn't happened. But I feel good about myself. I feel good about myself as long as I'm busy. I don't like not being busy.
Mm-hmm.
So it has changed, but there's never been a particular negative at any stage, apart from as a child being bullied and then turning that round. So each part of you is a development on the previous part. And if you keep seeing that, so I'm an old man now who's got very strong purpose. And I think that makes it makes me a bit magnetic when I'm talking to people. I don't just say, well, apart from my back, which is a bit more sore, and, I can see the wrinkles. I don't think like that. And
If
people
you
say that, yeah, yeah.
if you could sit down with your 25-year-old self, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to go even faster. So all the things you did, when you were thinking about it, hesitating about it, don't. Don't hesitate, because you were right the first time.
Hmm.
Sometimes you can think about things for too long, and then you talk to people and they say, well, why would you do that? You're happy in London. I say, I want to go back to Edinburgh. I'm going back to Edinburgh. But sometimes you delay decisions, and those delays are irritating when you look back. Or sometimes you miss the boat because... And I think the other thing is sometimes to leave your environment and just live the person you want to be. Even if it's for a week's holiday. Live that person. You just be that person. You don't know anyone else. It's a bit embarrassing if you meet an old girlfriend and you're going around saying, I own a business in Edinburgh and we're trying to change the whole face of communication. And then she appears around the corner. But I've done that. I go to places where I am not known, and I became the person that I wanted to step into. It's like practicing it and seeing how people respond.
And it's also kind of, I guess, living already up to the standard that you were aiming for. And
Yes.
I feel like people are scared, and me included, when I thought about the podcast for a year, instead of just starting. And now I notice that was, maybe I needed the time. I'm someone who believes in the right thing happens at the right moment. But still you can learn from that. So I can look back and say, hey, I didn't need the year. I could have started already a year before, because that was the thing I needed to do. Even if I hadn't figured it all out, I didn't really know what to do, how to do it, the technical aspects, the purpose behind it, whatever. But it will come to you if you're open to really figuring it out, trying it out, and seeing where it leads you.
Yes. I mean, I met someone a few years ago and they said, do you remember Linda? And I said, oh, Linda, I loved that girl. She said she was waiting for you to tell her that. And I said, what? Missed out. And all she wanted me was to say, Linda, I really like you. Do you fancy going out tonight? And she was waiting for that. And I was too frightened because I found her too sophisticated for me. But there you are. You don't do things and you hold back. And it's better to have gone for it and failed than to have hold back and realised that you could have.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. That's an interesting point I want to ask you. Nowadays, it's also a lot about who do I spend my time with. So it's family, it's friends, but it's also the life partner you choose. And I feel like that's something people are struggling with nowadays. Because there's so many, they feel like there's so many options, they have their values, they have their... the person has to do this and has to do that and has to be this kind of good looking and whatever it is. So I feel like people also tend to lose themselves in this felt endless options. What's your advice?
Well, something you can have fun with. I mean, that's the most important thing. Something you can play with, in the wider sense. And someone that shares your values, I think. Maybe not 100%, but at least your basic beliefs are the same. I don't think I would live with someone who was a fervent Trump supporter, for example. One of us would kill the other one very quickly. But I think you've got to challenge each other as well. You don't want to be clones of each other, but it's to have fun. It's to have humour in the relationship. I think that's important because that breaks so much tension. Look, I'm on my own now, so I'm not the best person. I've been in lots of relationships. Some have died, so nothing I could do about that. But I think it's having fun. Someone you can laugh with, someone you can do ridiculous things and giggle about it. I think that's really important, because if there's tension, one of them just goes and says, I'm going to run into the sea. Come on. That breaks that tension. But look, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, nowadays, when I was young, you only found a partner if you saw someone and you had the nerve to go up and talk to them. That it's all different now. But actually, a lot of girls approached me, even in the 60s and 70s. This idea that, you had to be a man and you had to go up. Particularly when I went to America, I think women were coming up to me and I was saying, God, what nerve you've got. They don't do that in my country.
Yeah.
So it was different. And you had to see people, you had to know them. There was no online image of people. There was none of this, enhanced photograph. And you meet someone, you think, my God, have you had an accident?
Yeah.
So it's getting out and meeting people. Absolutely, but meeting people. And if you're using online dating, it's the meeting, and just let's have fun. Let's have, let's go out for a night and just have a bit of fun and see how it takes us.
Yeah.
I can't. It's very difficult to offer, but a person you with is someone that supports you, believes in your purpose, you believe in their purpose. I think that's important.
What do you want to leave behind? Not as a legacy in stone, but as a spark in people.
I want to leave behind the materials. I've done a lot of writing. I'd like some of my talks to be shown for years to come. I want people to believe that they have agency and power that they never realise if they were just to look into their own minds, because that's what happens. We're told to bury our dreams. We're told to wait for disappointment. What a terrible attitude, Or you'll have lots of disappointments in your life. You'll fail lots of times. Yes, make it a positive thing. One disappointment is just the pathway to something that's much better. A failure is just something you've learnt from. Toddlers fall all the time. And they get up. They always get up. Unless the parent says, oh, darling, you've fallen, are you hurt? And then they think, this is quite interesting. I've got a wee bit of leverage here. If I fall and go, then I'll get all this lavish attention. But children automatically get up. They don't say, I've fallen, I can't do this. Never.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got to learn from. We have to keep going. We have to keep trying things. We have to make mistakes. We have to have, relationship failures. Well, no, we don't. My nephew met a girl. They've been married ever since, living in Australia. They're a mixed couple and they're blissfully happy. You don't know. That never happened to me. I didn't find a life partner, but I've lived as myself. And I don't want to be dragooned into doing things someone else's way. Because I think finding your own way and your own style and your own words and your own identity is quite important.
Yeah. All right, Mike, I have some quick fire wisdom questions for you.
Oh,
So just say what comes to mind.
okay.
What's one thing you've had to unlearn?
Everything I learnt at school. Because I realised that the way it was taught actually disappointed me in the subjects. So when I went out and I came to poetry from a different angle, I loved it. So you always have to unlearn the process of learning so that you can learn and enjoy it. It's like, if someone says to someone who's left school, they say, we've got classes going next week in this subject. They'd go, classes, no chance. They remember from school. So it's to unlearn the way you learnt.
One question you still ask yourself.
Why?
One moment you will never forget.
I think the moment I'll never forget is the first time I stood on stage with my guitar and played and got a fantastic reception. It was just like, I'm an entertainer. I'm a real performer. And that was an amazing experience. Amazing.
One belief that always pulled you forward.
The best is yet to come.
And one sentence you wish more people would live by.
Live in your own story, live in your own shoes. Don't be tempted by other people's straitjackets.
Thank you. Mike, I have one last question. It's kind of my brand question, let's call it that. What does bridging worlds mean to you in your life, your work, and your experience?
It means that I don't live in a colony. I live in a world of, you know, people of all different colours, all different genders. I don't care. I don't care. I love the diversity. I love meeting people, and I love working with young people as well. This old young thing, we've got to bridge that gap, but we've got to bridge worlds. Of course we do. We're one world, and we put all these constructs, our nation first. Mad.
Yeah. Listen, Mike, thank you for being on the show. You're a huge inspiration, someone to look up to, and I really do believe that you can and you will, and you already changed a lot in a positive way going into the future. And I hope you can keep on doing that for as long as you love to. And I hope to stay in touch. If people want to get in touch with you, stay up to date with everything you're doing, where should they go?
Mike Stevenson, my name there, .net. Well, I'm also on LinkedIn, Mike Stevenson, LinkedIn.
Perfect. Mike, thank you so much, and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
If you liked this episode, share it with someone. If you didn't, keep it to yourself and just pretend you were at yoga. And if you're into more of these kinds of impulses, follow me on Instagram and subscribe to Bridging Worlds. I don't promise much, just honesty, questions, and maybe a little chaos with good intentions. Until next time, ciao ciao.